أهلا ومرحبا بكم في الجلسة الثالثة
I would
من
like to
منتدى
welcome you
الجزيرة.
back to the third session at Al
عنوان
Jazeera
الجلسة
Forum
لهذا
titled
اليوم أو هذه الجلسة طبعا نحو عالم
Towards a
متعدد الأقطاب،
Multipolar
فرص
World,
وتحديات أمام
Opportunities
الشرق
and
الأوسط.
Challenges for the Middle
في
East.
ضوء تحول
So in
الحرب
the
على
light
غزة إلى
of
اختبار
the
شامل
transformation that
لشرعية
happened
النظام الدولي،
after the
حيث
world
عجز
of the war
مجلس
in
الأمن عن
Gaza,
إقرار
the
وقف إطلاق
Security Council,
النار
of course,
بسبب الفيتو الأمريكي
was incapable
المتكرر،
of
في
approving
مقابل
a
تحول الجمعية العامة إلى
ceasefire because
منصة
of the
اعتراض
American
عالمي
veto and
تصدر
turning
قرارات
this
متتالية
platform
تطالب
into
بوقف فوري لإطلاق النار دون تنفيذها. ومع انتقال
with,
المعركة من
of
الساحة
course,
القانون
moving
الدولي
the
إلى
battle
القضية
into the
المدى
international
الشرعية
law through the
ومرافقتها
genocide
مع دعم
case
متزايد
and
من
the
دول في الجانب
support it
العربي
gained from the
لتآكل
global
مصداقية
south
الحكم
and the
الدولي
erosion
حول
of
النظام
the
القائم على
integrity
القواعد،
and credibility
ثم
of
تزامن
the
ذلك مع
Western
تعمق شعور التدخل
approach and, of
وصعوبة
course,
بأن
the
المؤسسات
increasing
الحوكمة
feeling of the rising
الأمريكية
power that the
والداعمة السياسي
international organization for litigation is not really contribution in serving justice, of course, after the second of term of the beginning of the second term of President Trump. He practices policy through trade. What is the international global trust with this person by allies and enemies, and to what extent Gaza form a critical point in rearranging the global order, and is the transcontinental economic blocks that are forming. Of course, we will be discussing all these points in this session. Please allow me to welcome our guest, Mr. Ziad Majid, Professor of Political Science at the American University of Paris, Irina Subnina, Russian researcher and analyst, Azzeddin Abdel Manager of Research of Al Jazeera Center, and Lina Al Khatib, Principal Analyst at the UK-based Strategic Risk Analysis firm Extrac. And I would like to start with you, Mr. Ziad Majid. The Canadian Prime Minister in Davos talked about the death of the global support. Britain went to China in order to form trade alliances, and Macron and Davos talked that we are witnessing a world with no rules, no norms, and the Denmark Prime Minister said that the international order is under a lot of pressure, and maybe it's finished, with the new order of influence, and the American, it's a new strategy, saying that what's really care of is the Western part of the world. So is this distribution of the influence of between the United States and Russia, and is Europe a new part, a new pole, and do you think that Europe can be part or distributed between the different poles? Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be here, and I would like to answer the question. If you just allow me. I believe that we've entered a phase that is not really clear yet. And if we consider that our region and what is considered, what is called as the Middle East and the East, the Asian part of this region is a mirror for the change or the shift in the relationship in the world, I can say that we've witnessed many stages. The first one, after the First World War, Europe was dominant, and of course it reshaped the borders, and Israel was established during that time, and it lasted between the two wars, and there is a British, French dominance, and after that we went into American dominance as well, and then we went into the Cold War era, and these two, the Soviet Union and the United States, competed, and of course Israel was born there, and oil was discovered, and with the two oceans are linked between the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. It has its own geographical position, and of course, it was competed upon by Washington and Moscow, and of course, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Iraqi war after invading Kuwait, and that was, and then there was this American hegemony, and with the announcement of Bush the father of a new world order, and then we witnessed the Arab Springs and the counter revolutions, and then with this region has witnessed its own specificities that are related to regional parties like Iran with its expanded role after the fall of Saddam, and of course reaching into Lebanon, Syria, and in return, there was an enlarged influence of Turkey, which was started as an economic influence and then turned into a military one, with an attempt by the Gulf countries to play different roles that can replace an Arab absence, where Egypt was the main foundation, main pillar. All this happened in a time where dynamics have changed in the world because of economic reasons, and reasons are related to the American change, and that started during the Obama era and continued during the first term for President Trump. So that isolation trend started, and Europe considered itself as being safe and away from the security changes and challenges, and it relied on the United States and the NATO, of course, and it considered that the world is going into an American-Chinese economic rivalry that Europe can benefit from, and then be in a middle between the two countries. But it was taken by surprise by the involvement of the Russian role that probably internationally emerged through the intervention in the Syrian war, and of course Ukraine invasion, and through military power. So Europe once again found itself in need of the American support, and it doesn't have the military tools to what considers to be the Russian threat, and is relying on the American alliances. Of course, that have changed with the Trump second term that he kept repeating, and that was that statement that you referred to for Canadian officials and British officials and French and German officials for the first time, saying that Europe is no longer can rely on the United States. The United States is at least in this second Trump term is using a different logic, saying that its allies should care for their own affairs, and that America needs to rearrange the western part of the globe, and the crisis of Venezuela, of course, and violating the international law through abducting Maduro, Greenland issue, and saying that Canada must be an American state. Same thing when it comes to Iceland. All these issues made Europe and allies of United States made them think that it's time now for a new pole to emerge in the western part, to have Europe in the center with allies like Canada and even like Australia and other countries. This time the Chinese power came strong, forcing itself economically through policies that were quite cautious, but in 2023 was able to achieve a reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and try to play a role through a strong cooperation with Turkey in order to reproduce a new economic line which has energy, AI that can link Central Asia with Europe, and tried to emerge in Africa and to invest and to have a strong link with the African elite. So China in this concept reintroduces itself as a rival to United States, and the rise of the BRICS, of course, led by countries like Brazil, Brazil and South Africa. And these are not antagonizing Russia, but also feel or see as in Russia as China as another state that can face or create a balance with the United States. Of course, that came at the expense of roles that French was relying on with its alliance with Germany and Britain. Of course, the Brexit has weakened this trilogy, and the Ukrainian war weakened it as well, and created many challenges for it. So how is that reflected in our region? It's very clear that after the Arab Springs and the revolutions and the failure of democratic paths, and of course the outbreak of conflicts that many parties have taken part,
إقليمية أن تنشأ
that there is an opportunity for regional powers to impose itself without necessarily having alliances or American cover. When we talk about the Iranian role, of course, it relied on an alliance with Russia, China, but it's also relied on the conditions inside the Arab societies, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and of course invested in these scenes and adopted the Palestinian cause for reasons related to the Iranian regime, but to provide it with an extra space for intervention, and that role kind of retreated after the fall of the Syrian regime and the change in the things so in Iraq, and of course the weakening of resistance after the war in Israel. Of course, things in Bab el-Mandeb, things have changed through the Israeli recognition of Somaliland, and of course the Emirati presence in the region, and other roles in the Turkish one that of course the Saudi role is rising through alliances with Pakistan, trying to be more influential. There are roles as well for other Arab parties that has a smaller demographic and geographical role. And of course, Qatar was present during the Arab risings. So there is a regional order that is reshaping itself, that its features are not really clear, and there is a clear concern of an Israeli hegemony supported by the United States, and that takes us back to the American role, of course, with this genocide that took place in Gaza. Of course, the complete support to Israel, and that support that led to the creation of some kind of caution, even with the allies of for this hegemony. There is an Israeli hegemony, meaning that it is controlling the southern parts of Lebanon, and after the displacement of its people, and hegemony in the southern parts of Syria, and using the sectarian issue in order to impose the Israeli presence, and of course a complete hegemony in the Palestinian territory through the continuation of the annexation in the West Bank, and also the genocide in Gaza, and through what is called the rebuilding of Gaza, and the continuous occupation of 50%, more than 50% of Gaza, and controlling the crossings. That, of course, worries many countries, and they try to contain the Israeli hegemony. Of course, that makes it quite necessary for all the countries to work even harder. There is a tradition thinking that dealing with China can be limited only to economic aspects in return of the political coordination with the West, and some and others thought that Russia can be coordinated with and can be benefited from militarily. Maybe the reality imposes on us to have military cooperation and to have an Arab bloc that negotiates with the and maybe there is a need now to form new alliances within the Arab world. Egypt, because of the situation, the conditions in the African part of the Arab world, there are many questions, of course, and we've entered a new era that is not clear, and of course. It is quite fertile if we have political imagination and political will in order to overcome the catastrophic reality.
شاملة أشكرك عليها لكن أنا أريد
Thank you for this comprehensive talk, but we want to speak about Europe, especially that you said that there is a need for a new pole between Europe and Australia and Canada. Is Europe able to be among a new pole? And it has differences within themselves regarding Ukraine, Greenland, even the relationship with the United States now is divisive. No doubt Europe now faces more than a challenge. There is the EU, which is 27 different countries, and they don't really agree to one policy, but there are heavyweights in the EU for demographic reasons and political and economic, but the coordination is not full. There are internal agreements economically. For Russia, some countries in Central Europe prefer reconciliation with Russia to confrontation, while some in Eastern and Western Europe think that Moscow will not be limited to Ukraine, but may even threaten the European continent. The relationship with Washington, there is also division. On the right and far right in Europe, they prefer relationship with Trump, while others see in Trump a threat and that he is causing harm to the relations between the EU and the United States. You've seen Italy and Hungary, where there is big influence to the far right in power. And whenever they become stronger, there is likelihood to go towards Moscow and to come to Donald Trump in rapprochement. So there is an internal political directions that govern the alliance, and those 27 countries make this job difficult. But the demographic and economic size of Europe, if they agree to certain issues such as the relationship with China and India and some countries in the south, then they can play an important role. But regarding the end of a certain world order, the new order has not been crystallized yet. Specifically, after the genocidal war in Gaza, we see that the retreat of the institutions in the world which have been built after Second World War, and Trump now is abandoning even the UN as an organization that was guaranteeing some sort of an international cooperation. Therefore, that dictates the features of the new world order, which is not to give us any assurance, because the most powerful would end the current institutions and agreements and treaties, and this is not the end of everything, because the dynamics continue and many components could be added to the complications of the current landscape to give a new one. Okay, Ms. Elena Sobonina, Mr. Majid said some countries in Central Europe prefer reconciliation with Russia, while some think Russia threatens Europe somehow. But regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war after 4 years, now Russia is not triumphant, so will that cost it the loss of its reputation as an international power, superpower? Good evening to everybody. We call it special operation in Russia. We don't call it war, but you are right, it has turned into a real war, and it has become long. But let me start with something that could be local, but it is more than local. President Putin visits different areas in Russia continually. Since 2 years, he visited Grozny in Chechnya, and most of the people there are Chechens and they are Muslims. And he brought with him a book, which is the Quran, the Holy Quran, and it was an old version, an old Quran that is, and it was beautiful, and he visited one of the mosques in order to provide this holy book to the mosque, and during the ceremony he took the Quran and he kissed it. This was an expression by President Putin about his feeling towards the Muslim population. So why am I speaking about this? Yet our topic is about the future of the world and the principles of the new world. I am sure that the new world should rely on certain fundamentals, which this world will not be good unless they are the same principles and pillars written in holy books, which we all respect since childhood days. We should rely on cultures and values, because in the US, for example, there are the neocons who want to end everything. They want to end humanitarian values and other main values. So thus the world will lose a good deal. And Russia is convinced that building the new world order should be built on fundamentals with values. Can we build a new world without finding a solution to the Palestinian cause? Never. How will that world be? There will not be justice in it, but the new world order should contain justice, and this is a Russian principle. Why Russia now speaks about the necessity to build a new security order in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries. This is possible, and this was done during the Cold War. And the Helsinki negotiations were ongoing in the 70s. Despite the differences between the US and Russia, we were able, nevertheless, to reach the building of an order which guaranteed some kind of a peaceful coexistence between countries who have big nuclear arsenals, and Europe joined this path. And the Helsinki negotiations, to begin with, were between Russia and the United States and Europe. So despite the differences, building something new is possible. This is a point. Despite the turbulations nowadays and the world now going in the wrong trajectory, I am still optimistic that rationalism must exist. You say building something new is possible. What's the position of Russia, and will it be one of the poles of this new world order? The idea of multipolarism is a Russian idea, and it was put forward by Yevgeny Primakov, former prime minister, and I knew him personally, God bless him, and he spoke about multipolarism and spoke about the triangle between Russia, India, and China. Now, we in Russia are not insisting on multipoles because we feel that this is something that is ideal, but building the regime in such a way is very difficult. So there might be different poles or alliances, but most importantly, those alliances should not be faced by other alliances, because if there is an enmity that is ongoing, then this is a disaster. Putin was asked once, is he afraid of the third world war, which could be nuclear? He said, no, we're not afraid of anything. We have nuclear bombs sufficient to destroy the whole world. Same thing applies to America. But these are deterrent weapons, and we don't want to use them. And he said, at the end of the day, if there's something to happen, then we will go to paradise, because our path is the path of the righteous ones. But they will go to hell. Okay, this is a far future. No, it's not far. You said, President Putin said that if there is a nuclear war, then Russia is ready, but it's not settling the war on its own border with Ukraine. Explain. Here, this war or military operation started because of the expansion of NATO, and they expanded to the borders of Russia. This is contrary to American promises during the disintegration of the Soviet Union. They told Gorbachev they were just verbal promises, and from our end now we feel betrayed. How did we believe verbal promises from the Americans? Could that have happened without a betrayal? So this is a big question. So now you insist that we should speak about the crisis in Ukraine. There is talk now about providing guarantees, but some in Europe understand that guarantees for Ukraine only. No, incorrect. We in Russia also want our own guarantees to neutralize Ukraine and NATO not expanding. So the guarantees should be given to all, even to the Europeans. At least they are our neighbors. So those guarantees should be given to all. For that reason, Russia insists on something credible, verbal, and tantamount to the Helsinki talks or negotiations or Yalta talks. If we go back to reality,
if we go back to reality, President Putin always talked about the pressures that Russia is falling under and the sanctions, and he attributed those to the disrespect to the international laws and norms. But people who say that or claim that the United States ways of resolving disputes are not based on the international norms. And of course, you have good relationships with the United States. For example, it looks into Ukraine today as a case of minerals, Venezuela as an issue of oil. How do you read this? We are in a world that is in a stage that the United States doesn't really believe in or doesn't see in the international law as a way to resolve disputes. Of course, there are two questions that are important. The first one is the American hegemony, is it continuous or endlessly? And the second one, if it didn't end. And I believe the answer is that the American hegemony hasn't finished, despite all the efforts of Donald Trump to reflect the opposite, or to state the opposite. So this hegemony will end soon, and the United States in its way to decline. What will happen? Who will take? Who will replace this global order that existed after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War? This talk reminded me of Yalta conference in 1945, and it took place in February, and similar to these days, and lasted from 4th until the 11th of February, where it was held. Just when it was held in Yalta, the shores of the Black Sea, and this is in Crimea, that we in Russia consider as historically Russian since Yekaterina II. So the American President Roosevelt and the British Prime Minister Churchill was there from Moscow to Yalta. Joseph Stalin was present as well. So they insisted on Stalin agreed and they agreed because they needed the Soviet Union and keep facing Germany and Japan, specifically Germany. Before the first meeting, Joseph Stalin was late for 15 minutes. He was upset. He said, why is Churchill and Roosevelt, of course, they were very upset and annoyed. Where were you late? And he said, Stalin said that I wanted to meet and to open the front for 2 years, and for 2 years did not agree on that request. You were late for 2 years. I was late for 15 minutes only. Why I remember or talk about this now? Because the upheavals are increasing. What do we worry? We worry that there might be a delay that will lead into the third media war, the third world war, but maybe something serious would happen. We should not be late. We should agree, and the improvement of relationship between the United States and Russia, it's an evidence that understanding can happen. Is this an understanding or a dangerous thing is happening? We are at a crossroad now. We have to choose the scenario that we can write. As you and Al Jazeera, you can write. You write a scenario for a program. We are writing our scenarios now. We are at a critical point, at a juncture. We have to take a decision, and we have more than that. We have to take tangible steps. Thank you, Ms. Alina Subinina, for that. If we move into Ms. Lina Khatib, Ms. Alina said that we are at a juncture now, and we have, and I'm asking now, why do we have to deal that the world is with a multipolar world is taken for granted? For example, we have also the economic blocs, ASEAN and BRICS. Couldn't they protect the joint interests and protect peace and stability? Or maybe they can create influence for those countries. Where is the Middle East from all that? Now, in my opinion, the problematic with the multipolar system is that describing the world order based on division between a Western pole that is led by the United States and other poles that are facing this American hegemony, or maybe there is a retreat in the American hegemony, and this is not reflective of the reality. This concept put other countries at the same level as the United States, and now we would like to ask who writes the geopolitical global agenda, who formed the Peace Council. There is a geopolitical polar that is dominant with no rivalry, which is the United States. And that, in my opinion, bears positive opportunities for the Arab world. The center of the power in the Arab world here in the Gulf, we see the prominent part that Gulf countries that can play in the policies, regional policies, also the important Saudi role, that what's happening in Syria and Iran as well, and what is happening, and the role of Qatar in mediation between Israel and Hamas, and also the role that Oman played in mediation between the United States and Iran, of course, hosting in UAE the talks that the Saudi Arabia as well, the role that played in mediating for talks between Ukraine and Russia, also the defensive agreements, the strategic defense agreement, which was signed between the Saudi and the United States 2 days ago. We've seen naval exercises between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and also the agreement of President Trump to sell F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia. And of course, Qatar is a major ally for the United States outside NATO, and of course for trade deals. We see deals between different Gulf countries and the United States about minerals and AI and investment. So the relationship between the Gulf countries and the United States has shifted from alliance into a partnership, and this partnership enables or authorizes all the parties, American and Arab, to grow and develop together. So this is not one direction relationship where the United States dictate its wishes and demands. It is a partnership, for Gulf countries where it has an authority, and this cannot be applied on the relationship of these countries, the Gulf countries, with Russia, for example, or China, or India, or Pakistan, or Europe. So these relations with other countries, these are pragmatic relationship because due to the national interest, and it's not a geopolitical partnership similar to the one with the United States. And when we look into the global bigger picture, we see that the changes in Venezuela and the developments happening in Iran due to the Iranian sanctions, for example, exacerbates the cost on China. And I remember, like a couple of years ago, a Russian source mentioned that Russia doesn't want to be pushed in the same corner with Iran and China, and that talk was during the war, the big war between Syria and the war in Syria, which Russia was part to. So when we see the situation now, we see that Iran is losing its influence in the region, and of course the balance of powers in the Middle East is changing, and this is in the interest of the Arab countries. The role of Russia is retreating, and then we heard that there is a change in the Russian position from direct confrontation, and Syria was probably the field for this confrontation. The Russian position has changed into a pragmatic acceptance for the American role, and that probably retreat or receipts was represented. Russia provided Iran with the air defense systems, but Russia did not renew it when Israel destroyed it. And then the change that is taking place in Iran is paving the way for solutions for other issues and crises in the Middle East. On top of it is the Palestinian cause. And we go back to the Gulf countries' role, which is very important. And as we said, that it is in partner with the United States. It will contribute in creating stability in the region for the long run. You mentioned very many points, but when it comes to the Arab world, you repeated the partnership with the United States. So if you can define the partnership from your own vision. Is it only economic? Is it are these groups of states that are close to the or part of the American alliance? And Elina Subinina said that America is in the decline. Do you think that the Arab countries is leaning towards partnerships with China and Russia? Economically, for example, there are investment agreements between or deals between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and these agreements, these deals are based on the fact that the American and the Saudi firms, they grow together in a joint manner. This is a way of growth that is difficult to dismantle. And when we see that the Gulf region is embracing a big number of or hosting a big number of the American military bases, and this is a long-term thing as well. So when we see the economic and military relations and political relations, this is not a short-term phase. We are talking about a long-term relations which has foundations that is very hard to change, even after the end of President Trump's presidency. This is not a temporary thing. It is a change in the way of dealing in this military and economic intertwinement is very hard to break up. China has no military bases, for example, in the Gulf, and has no $1 trillion when it comes to investment, Saudi investment. The rate of contribution or the investment with China is very quite small when it compared to the relationship with the United States. Thank you so much, Ms. Selina Al-Khatib.
إليك وسنذهب بك إلى غزة ولو نأخذ مسافة من الحرب الإسرائيلية على غزة.
We see the interactions of the Israeli war on Gaza, which has really distinguished positions, which could lead to something really, or is it linked to the nature of the wars and the Board of Peace also, if you can tell us about? And despite the tragedy of this war, many of its ramifications have led to recognizing the state. So the Board of Peace, how does it impact those chances? It's good to go back to Gaza after speaking about the whole world, because Gaza is linked to what is happening worldwide. Gaza is the place where we've seen brutality in its most egregious manners, not only by Israel, but the whole world. So this brutality reflects what happened in the world. Gaza was not able to be saved by any way or by any quarter, regionally or in the Arab world or internationally, how many summits were held but failed to bring about a solution? How many meetings in the Security Council failed to put forward any resolution, and when that happened, they were not implemented. The same applies to the General Assembly. So, internationally speaking, the whole world failed to give anything to Gaza. So I call this hegemony, brutality personified in the genocide war. This regime and order did not stop. Gaza was a mirror of this fragility of the international order and the weakness and the decline of the world, where we saw entities or skeletons of the international order, but they were helpless, did not provide anything to this cause. So this brutality and savagery takes us back to the 30s when Gramsci, the philosopher of Italy, wrote in his memoir in prison, and when he said the old order is dying and the new order is struggling to be born. Gramsci was in prison then, in the prison of Italian fascism, and he was speaking about the political changes and the social changes in Europe then, which are linked with the rise of fascism and Nazism in Italy, in Germany, in Japan, Spain. So this statement shows the transformation of the world order at that time, which led to the Second World War from the 30s till the end of the 30s. And thus there was a new world order as we see it now that has been formulated, started with bipolarism and lately unipolar world with the US on the helm. So we have seen the brutality of genocide war in Gaza, which was similar to what Europe has witnessed in the 40s, and thus the international order started being formulated. So we are in the same time, also an era of the reformulation of the world order. So you say Gaza is a pivotal point. Yes, Gaza reflects the rest of the crises lived by the whole world order. The international order, or rather Gramsci, spoke about the monster's appearance during the transformation, also includes the appearance of chances and opportunities. Similarly, here we have chances and opportunities. If there is willingness, it will be turned to the benefit of people. Give you an example. Lately, we have seen two things that show there are opportunities. A few weeks ago, there was an imminent attack against Iran. The region's parties moved and they said this is to be postponed or cancelled. So there was regional coordination between the Gulf and Turkey that has led to postponing this strike at least for a while at least, and open this new space that we see now. The second move, the visit of President of Turkey to Riyadh and Cairo a few days ago, which shows there are real chances and the main region's countries could benefit from them and to turn things to their own interests. Now we go back to Carney in Davos. Yes, Prime Minister of Canada. Yes, when he spoke about the mid-range powers which could coordinate their efforts and to contribute to formulating this order. This is important because in the region there are mid-powers that could get engaged, coordinate their efforts, make conglomerates and alliances regionally, and benefit from the move towards transformation. A few days ago, Qatar and the UAE joined the so-called the Pax Silica Alliance, which is technical in nature, led by the US, directed towards developing technologies in terms of the infrastructure and energy and AI. So this is part of the transformation in this historical era, which opens the space for opportunities. Palestinian cause, all these interactions are for the benefit of the Palestinian cause if the region is ready to do that. So the Arab countries, are they closer to alliances or conglomerates, or to have a unified position? In the formations of those, we see a continuation of competition which weakens the rapprochement. We've seen that in Yemen, Somalia, and Libya. If the desire becomes overwhelming, then the region is able to push with the rapprochement to turn into alliances. The Saudi-Pakistani is an alliance. It's not a rapprochement, but between Saudi and Egypt and Turkey and Qatar, and maybe to be joined later by regional countries. This is important, and it could turn into an alliance or coalition if the transformation process goes by speedily. We will wait to see. Thank you all. Before we end, we open the floor for Q&A. However, we will take one question to each guest only. Anyone who has a question to Izzuddin Abdel Mawla, please go ahead. Is the question to Dr. Izzuddin Abdel Mawla?
You want to ask
تريد أن تسأل سؤالا؟
Which one? Well, it's a brief commentary to what Ms. Suponina said. I am professor from Ukraine. My name is Oleksiy Gerань, and I would like to give you facts, not interpretations. Interpretations may be different, that's fine, but there are facts. When Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, Ukraine was neutral and non-allied. Second, Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons, the third largest nuclear arsenal. And third, Russia guaranteed our borders. So and fourth, Ukrainians didn't want to join NATO. So question, where Ms. Suponina as well as President Putin saw the threat from NATO, they are repeating all that contradicts the very facts. I am providing you hard facts, which is very easy to check. What is the real reason for Mr. Putin to attack Ukraine? Again, he said on many, many occasions, Ukrainians do not exist as a nation. In the Russian Empire, we were officially called Little Russians. So basically, what Mr. Putin is trying to do, he is trying to restore Russian Empire and to crush Ukrainian identity. That's all. Thank you very much. And final point, yesterday we were talking a lot about Netanyahu, so please do not forget that ICC issued arrest warrants not only to Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also, guess, to President Putin for deportations of Ukrainian children. Shukran.
Thank you. إذن هذا السؤال كان للسيدة إلينا سوبونينا. يعني أعطيك المجال للإجابة عليه، لكن لنأخذ بقية الأسئلة رجاء سنسأل فقط سؤال، يعني نأخذ سؤال واحد من الجمهور لكل من الضيوف. إذن من يريد أن يسأل لي سيد عز الدين عبد المولى؟
Mr. عز الدين
يعني تفضل.
You have the floor, sir.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله.
دكتور رشيد
بالمطرع أستاذ العلوم السياسية بجامعة الجزائر.
Professor of Political Science at the University of Algeria. If you allow me at the beginning I believe it is out of political manners to avoid this created the Middle East concept, this terminology, which is the Times report in Tehran at the beginning of the 20s, because it includes Israel in the region, because it is a process that's only limited to the civilization. My question, if you believe that Gaza is the core of these changes, don't you think that it is the whole thing is related to the agreeing on the belief and of the coming states, also about multi من المبكر
أعتقد أنها موضة.
believe it is an international fashion, as we talked about globalization, because the superpowers like Arab parties don't want to reach the power, but it's to participate, and it doesn't guarantee reaching that power.
ستشارك في نظام دولي جديد إن صح التعبير.
Will contribute in the new world order, and this is a real political reality. Please, because we're out of the short, because of the constraints of time, please limit your intervention with the question. How can the region benefit from the rivalry between superpowers, between taking into consideration the polarization in the region, the multipolarism? Does it increase the possibility of regional conflicts, and what kind of reflections will it have on the Middle East? To whom you are addressing your question. So I would like to hear from the lady there.
بداية السلام عليكم.
Fatima Zahra, journalist in Al Jazeera channel. My question is addressed to Ms. Selina Al Khatib. You talked about the transformation of the relationship between the United States into the Middle East from alliance into a partnership. You, as an analyst, how do you look into the American support umbrella for Israel, despite the continuous aggressions and for many against many countries in the Middle East? Question for Mr. Ziad Majid. So Dr. Muhammad Jabir, my question, in a world of a multipolar world, and with Turkey's attempts to forge new alliances with Saudi, Egypt, and maybe Pakistan and other countries, do you think this alliance can be successful, taking into consideration the strong links between the Arab countries and the United States and Arab countries? So we have 1 minute to answer all these questions. So please keep it brief. I don't know if I can start with the settlements, the labeling of the Middle East, or to stay away from it. All these labelings, of course, it has geopolitical implications, and of course, for the West, it is the Middle East that divides wars. There is Far East and the Middle East and Near East. So it is a geopolitical label. The Chinese, they don't call it Middle East, they call it West of Asia, because they start from their own position. And how do they look into that, into this part of the world? So regardless of it is labeled, after that we can discuss that. What is here now is the Middle East. As for Gaza, of course, the Palestinian state is under discussion, and we've seen that how Saudi Arabia has led a very important effort in order to repositioning to reintroduce the issue of the Palestinian state, and Israel completely rejected this idea, and the Americans are not really ready for Palestinian states. The Palestinians have to unify under that request until it's time to introduce and to create the appropriate conditions for that request. So we move to Mr. Ziad Majid. So just quickly, the coalition that you, or alliance that you referred to between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan with the Turkish role, Egyptian role, maybe it expands even bigger, and there are negotiations with Indonesia that provides this alliance with a very strategic demographic depth. It is a very important one, providing that these capitals are really, they really care about what is further than an economic or temporary coordination, because of the fear of the Israeli role and the American support. If these countries are convinced that it's interest not only to stay within the American space, because it's not protected by the by Israel, it may be that it's not, it doesn't mean severing the relationship with the United States, but maybe forging new relations and new alliances with Russia, with South Africa, with China. So the political option is required, because it is a new stage where it's all about theories and not exact calculations. I believe that the Israeli bombardment in Doha, where Israel tried to assassinate Palestinian officials, it was witnessed that the American weapons in the region, that America tried by selling these weapons to be used against Iran and not against Israel. And this is a very clear thing, and it imposes challenges on capitals in the Gulf and in the region in order to reintroduce its role in this changing world. Ms. Elena, question by, I believe that the question proves that the reality, the disagreements between Russia and Ukraine are still very sharp, and that means that the negotiations that's happening in place with the international mediation will take time, because there are disagreements, historic disagreements, and since the days of the Tsars and the collapse, breakup of the Soviet Union, because much of what we witness today is because of mistakes that were committed during the collapse, the period of the collapse of the Soviet Union. We want this crisis to end. When it comes to threats, we feel that there was a real threat. I used to travel a lot with Putin and with Russian foreign ministers, and through Russian delegations, I've attended many NATO summits. In each summit at the late 90s and the beginning of the millennia, and there was a talk about Georgia's membership and Ukrainian membership at NATO, unfortunately, and it was not us, but the Henry Kissinger, in his latest article, he pointed more than once that Ukraine looks at itself as it has one neighbor, which is Europe and the West, and it's completely forgetting that there is Russia, which is also a big neighbor. Just a comment about Gramsci, philosopher, and that saying was mentioned because we are at a crossroads. Either a new order will be built through negotiations or understandings, or otherwise we will have a war as it happened through Gramsci was present in Italy during the Second World War. We have to avoid this scenario. participation that you discussed, I talked about with the United States, gives more space for the Arab countries, especially Gulf countries, to direct the policies to pressure Israel. So only Washington can pressure Israel in order to solve this problem. Thank you so much for the panelists and for the audience. Selina Khatib, and thank you so much, and Ms. Elina Subinina, and thank you, Mr. Ziad Majid, thank you so much, and Mr. Azzeddin Abdel Mawla, thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا لكم الأعزاء الحضور. الثورة الرقمية وإعادة توزيع القوى العالمية مع زميل جلال شهدة ستكون بعد الغداء الساعة 3. ننتظركم. شكرا.